go straight to the topic, and I'm glad that you mentioned this issue of the relationship between the domestic and the regional and foreign relations, because at the end of the day, everything is domestic. And it is also my impression that many people outside Iran do not pay sufficient attention to the dynamics of social, economic, cultural, political changes that at the end of the day, they influence so much the foreign relations of the country. It was almost 20 years ago when I was invited for the first time to participate in a session, in academic conference with a professor from Tehran University. This was the first time, because usually they don't speak. They didn't speak. Even today, they are very hesitant to speak, like Shai and Shkaki was sitting here earlier. So I agreed, and topic was Iran and Israel. This was in Odense in Denmark. I flew to Copenhagen, took a train to Odense, arrived there in the winter night, very late at night. I think it was after 10 o'clock, and then I get a telephone call from the Iranian friends. And they wanted to meet with me. So I met with them and said, I thought it's, it's a friendly meeting. Say, if he speaks with you tomorrow in the same session on Iran and Israel, when he goes back, he goes straight to jail. So we better change the topic to be Iran and Israel at the time of Cyrus the Great. So I told them, but there was no state of Israel at that time. So well, do something. So I spoke about the Jews of Iran from Cyrus the Great, and so I can empathize with the army was going through. Let me begin with a few very brief introductory remarks. Unlike what is being portrayed in Iran and in the West in different ways about this country, Iran is not totally black and it's not totally white. It's a complex country. It's 80 million people with rich history and culture, once having been an empire. And I think there is a misjustice in Western media portraying Iran as the way they are being portrayed. It's very, very rare that an Israeli is being asked to speak louder. So I'll try my best. So Iran is a very complex country. There are different people, different trends, even in religion, and I'll come to it in a moment. It's important to remember because, as I said, Iranians present themselves to be pure, nice people, and every policy is the best in the world. It is not true. On the other side, I think also what I read from some time to time in Western media, it's also not true. The other point is that, and I'm not going to elaborate on it much, the Middle East is going through a very difficult times, and it's really a changing. I almost say the new Middle East, it's not, I think the term that you use, the changing Middle East is more appropriate, but so many things are changing in very fundamentally, and we don't know today what will be tomorrow in terms of nation states, in terms of relations between states. Enemies of the past became friends today, and we don't know how long it's going to last. There is also significant change in the policy and position of the United States in the Middle East, which, by view, it's enabled the treaty, the deal between Iran and the 5+1 to take place recently. And the other point that I'll be relating to is the nuclear deal, what enabled it, and what are the consequences that we see from this deal. But before, usually when I speak about Iran to people that I suspect that they have gone through a seminar on the history of Iran, I would like to put on your table three, I think, basic questions that are important to understand, at least the questions, if not the answers, before going on into the topic. Today we speak about everything is Islamic. Islamic Republic, Islamic State, Islamic democracy, Islamic terrorism, everything is Islamic. The question is, to what degree the roots of this movement that brought about the Islamic Revolution in Iran have been religious? And I think Professor Shkaki referred to it this morning when he spoke about the social economic roots of such a phenomenon. I lived in Tehran in the last 2 years of the Shah's rule. I saw this revolution building up at that time. If no one will convince me that the movement in 1978-9 was religious. There were communists participating in this coalition of Ayatollah Khomeini, liberal intellectuals, all professors of Tehran University and other universities. It was a social, economic, political, religious, international revolution. People joined in not because of to establish an Islamic Republic. I think the aims of this movement, by and large, were 2 or 2.5. First, to secure better welfare to the children of Iran of the next generation. Welfare. The second is freedom. So I can sum up the goals in 2 words: bread and liberties, welfare and freedom. This was the aim of the young people of '79. The half, and I think also significant, is the dignity of the Iranian people. So if this is true, the final stabilization of Islamic Revolution does not have to do with the degree of control of this government on the different institutions of power. It has to do with the degree that this revolution will be capable of satisfying the expectations of the generation of 1979. As it seems from today, there is a long way to go to achieve such goals. The second question is to what degree the philosophy of this revolution was Islamic. Let's take only the religious element in this revolution. Is there one Islam? Yes. There is one Islam, there is one Judaism, one Christianity, but we don't live today as Jews, as Judaism used to be 3,000 years ago. Christianity is not exactly what it used to be 2,000 years ago, and why should we believe that Islam remained the same as it came to earth in the 7th century? We live today by our interpretations of the principles of faith, and our interpretations vary from generation, not every day, but from time to time. If I put it in the words of maybe the leading Iranian intellectual of the Islamic Revolution, Abdul Karim Soroush, who was the head of the cultural revolution of Khomeini, who purified the universities from their professors and then became in opposition to this regime. And he said this following sentence: there is no one interpretation of Islam. There is no one interpretation that is better than another one. There is no final interpretation of Islam. In a very courageous way, he added, which led him to go into exile since then, there can be no official interpretation of Islam. Namely, that even an Islamic regime cannot tell you, this is the only way to understand Islam. This is un-Islamic. And there are different interpretations, mainly in Shiite Islam, that allows greater freedom for interpretation to clerics. I'll give you an example. When Khomeini came to Iran, there have been 7 grand ayatollahs in Iran, 7 most prominent ayatollahs. None of them supported Ayatollah Khomeini. The most leading ayatollah in Iran at that time went under house arrest under the Islamic revolutionary regime until he passed away 6 years later. The man that Ayatollah Khomeini prepared to be his successor, Ayatollah Montazeri, was removed from grace because he criticized the Islamic regime. He went to house arrest and until he died 6-7 years ago. So there is a degree of pluralism and differences in interpretations even within the clerics. Of course, this pluralism exists within the political, religious politicians that we see in Iran today in government. The third question is to what degree the policy of the Islamic Revolution is faithful to the ideology with which they came to power 36 years ago. And what happens in Iran is not different with what happens in any other revolution or in any other government in moving from opposition to power. In opposition, you can say whatever you want. When you come to power, with authority comes responsibility. You have to feed 80 million people. You must be pragmatic. And Iranians have been pragmatic in almost in each and every case. There was a clash between ideology and interest of the state, interest of the regime, or survival of the regime, and for them is the same thing. Interest won over ideology. Here again, one or two examples. The first decision that Ayatollah Khomeini had to take in foreign relations was how you call this Gulf of water between Iran and the Arabs. The Arabs call it the Arab Gulf, the Iranians call it the Persian Gulf, and Khomeini decided the Gulf should be called Persian Gulf. Contrary to what he said just 2 days earlier, that all Muslims are brothers. There is no difference between Arab, Baluch, Kurds, Turks, and so on and so forth. But when he, as a head of the state, he said that this Gulf should be a Persian Gulf. And when Ayatollah Khalkhali, one of the leading Ayatollahs, came to him and said, let's call it the Gulf of the Muslims and solve the problem between us and the Muslims, Khomeini said, no, the Gulf has been Persian and will remain Persian. The Iranian constitution of '79 states that there is no difference between Muslims, Sunnis, Shiites, etc. But you go a few articles down and see who can be president of Iran, for God's sake. Only a Shiite of Iranian origin. And in the first presidential elections in 1981, one of the leading candidates was Jalaluddin Farsi, Jalaluddin the Persian. Many people, students of Middle East, remember Jamaluddin Afghani, who was Persian, so Jalaluddin Farsi was Afghan. Khomeini disqualified him 4 days before election because his father was born in Afghanistan. And there is no difference between Muslims, Shiites, Sunnis, Arabs, and so on and so forth. So I don't mean that revolutionary leaders wake up in the morning and the first question in their mind is, what can I do today to deviate from my dogma or to do things contrary to what I promised. No, they wake up in the morning and they want to fulfill their wishes and implement their ideology. But where is the clash between the two, they opt for the interest rather than ideology. So gradually, this is the main issue in Iran, not the question of following interest or not, to what degree to deviate from dogma in what field and in what rate. And there are differences between groups that we usually call pragmatists, reformists, moderate, and so on, and on the other side, radicals, extremists, conservatives, and so on. And I think it's a real struggle for power within the Islamic revolutionary regime. They're not playing games. There is a real differences of interpretations, opinions, political, religious, and so on. Let me say a word about the more pragmatic elements. And here again, there is some, we want so much to portray Iran in as a dark picture, we forget there is a civil society in Iran which is more advanced, I believe, more than any other Muslim country in the Middle East. Newspapers, as much as they allow them to publish newspapers before they are shut down, they have contents. When I read Arabic newspapers, Iraq under Saddam or whoever, and the Iranian papers under Khatami, it's a whole difference between the two. Iran is more advanced. I spoke like this, it was in 2005, I remember, with a group of Israeli diplomats, and I spoke about it. And one of the diplomats asked me how you can speak about even relative or freedom of expression when 100 liberal newspapers were shut down in Iran in 5 years. I said, this is the answer. Show me another country in the Middle East which has 100 liberal newspapers to shut them down. So it is, the way you look at it is different. I don't say that Iran is paradise, and I don't encourage you to buy tickets and go and visit or live there. No, it's far from that. I'll come to it. Cinema industry in Iran is the most developed, most successful in any other country in the Muslim world, and not only in the Muslim world. Books published in Iran are fun to read. I'll give you a title of a book written, again, all of them by Islamists, all of them by faithful people to Ayatollah Khomeini. This is Akbar Ganji, who was one of the people who occupied the American embassy, very radical Islamist. And he was disappointed from the revolution, and he writes a book more than 10 years ago, in Tehran published. The title is A Fascist Interpretation of Religion and State, claiming in the book that the Islamic regime is fascist. Of course you go to jail. You can't write such a book in Iran and not visit the jail. But the book was sold in 10 editions in a few months. I was speaking about this with a friend of mine from one of the Iranian universities about this dichotomy between some signs of free expression and suppression on the other hand. And he told me, you know, David, they tell you there is no freedom of expression in Iran. That's not true. We have freedom of expression. What we don't have is freedom after expression. But it's deeper than it sounds. They criticize, they go to jail, and I think that the whole civil society is much more progressive women organization, and I didn't cover everything. But the problem is that the real power is not in the hands of these nice intellectuals. Real power is in the hands of the radical clerics, which have three major assets in hand. First, they speak in name of God. It's very powerful in the Middle East when you can speak in name of God and tell the people, the crowd, exactly what is the will of God in any minute. I don't know how they communicate, but there are modern ways of communication today. They know exactly. I love most when they describe the hell. I didn't see many description of paradise, but the description of hell, they know exactly what's going on there, how people suffer, and then they use it as a way to speak to the people and encourage support. The other advantage that they have is there is no opposition. There are oppositions. The other advantage they have, the will to remain in power. That's not the Shah that they will leave the country. They don't have where to live. They will stay there. And they are willing to use force to suppress the people. There is no limit how cruel they can be. The first president of Tehran University after the revolution wrote an article recently about Daesh. He says in this article that Daesh of today is the Islamic Revolution of 1979. And I don't want to say exactly these are the same, but I think that this is the man who was appointed president of Tehran University because of loyalty to this regime, not because he was against this regime. So things change. And again, to convince you further, I quote to you a sentence from a sermon of leading Iranian Ayatollah Yazdi. This man, while the Islamic regime was suppressing students a few years ago in the streets of Tehran, this man on a Friday sermon said this following sentence: "Whoever thinks that Islam is a religion of mercy does not understand what is Islam. Islam is a religion that dictates to us to take a sharp sword and cut the heads and tongues of people who speak or act against us." And that's what they do. So the power is in their hands. And with all the due respect to the intellectuals, liberals, whatever you term them, at the end of the day, the people who make decisions in Iran are the people who belong to the more conservative, radical group. So I mentioned the changes in Iranian policy, and the question would come, why there is no change in the attitude toward Israel? They have retreated from so many dogmatic principles. There are two issues in which they did not really retreat. One is animosity to America, with all what we heard about the deal, American deal with Iran, the hostility towards Western civilizations remained the enemy number one of Iran today. And of course Israel. And I don't know whom they hate more, Israel, because it's close to America, or America is supportive of Israel, but it's two. If you are a revolution, and if you are a failed revolution, and you have only two flags in hand, what would wisdom dictate? To put them down or to raise them higher? What I think the current government tries to do is to separate between the two and try to be nicer to the Americans, but at that time it have to be, by necessity, more vocal against Israel. But in the case of Israel, when I say that there is retreat from dogma, and I mention it more than once, that it's not out of they volunteer to be more pragmatic, but they are forced to be more pragmatic. In the case of Israel, there is no clash between ideology and interests. Ideologically, they are against the state of Israel. Why? Because Jews, in their understanding, is not a nationality. Judaism is religion. And therefore, Jews do not deserve a state, certainly not in the Middle East, of course not with Jerusalem as its capital. This is a struggle between the absolute good of Islam and absolute blasphemy and enemies of Islam. One of them must be destroyed for the other to survive. So, in many ways, in dogmatic ways, we can understand. So why there is no change? Because I think that here they don't pay price for their animosity towards Israel. Certainly not meaningful price compared to the benefits that they gain. If you want to be the leader of the Muslim world, you have to raise the flag of Jerusalem. And for them, there is some compensation for this animosity towards Israel because it promotes their policy achievements in presenting themselves as the leading power in the Middle East, in the Muslim world. It is also a good excuse to explain the economic difficulties or the suppression at home. Wherever they run into problem, thanks God they have the state of Israel. That's because of Israel, because of imperialism, because of so and so and so. So I don't see here good reason for them to retreat from the dogma on this issue. Israel is a convenient enemy. There is a Persian phrase, they said, it's a low wall, a wall that you can step over it, step on it. That's Israel. I don't want to say that they do not lose things, but their benefit is much more. Just think about one issue. They became now one of the leading, or maybe the leading power today in the Middle East, bordering with the heart of the Middle East in their view, Jerusalem and Israel. They have Hezbollah, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and so on and so forth. Again, it doesn't mean that there are no other views in Israel, in Iran. There are other views about Israel. There are people who are asking themselves, do we really have to focus on this Israeli issue all the time? There is a Persian phrase again that says that, and some people use it. When they use it, I know that they are much more pragmatic and moderate. Say, why we have become a plate which is warmer than the soup. You know, when you drink hot soup, the outside is not warmer than the soup itself. So basically, what you say, why we have to become more Catholic than the Pope? Why tend to be more Palestinian than the Palestinians? The bowl should be warm, but certainly not warmer than the Palestinians themselves. And you could see in 2009, the Iranian young people, the Green Movement, put on fire the flag of the PLO, and one of the slogans are, why should I care about Hamas and the Hezbollah, Iran? And the focus of them is Iran rather than the others. Now, there is recently a change that allowed some kind of deal that we saw between Iran and the United States, and the 5+1 actually. The change started in 2009 after the re-election of Ahmadinejad. I believe you saw in the television the Green Movement going to the streets, and this was really the beginning of the Arab Spring in many ways. The same days that it was happening, I was in a conference with Iranians and others, and I remember two Egyptian women said, "Mashallah, mashallah." When Egypt is going to have such a movement in Cairo? It didn't take even 2 years, and they had it. So in many ways, Iran is an example. For Iranians, it's for sure the Arab Spring is an outcome of the Islamic Revolution. But here again, there is a difference. The conservatives say this is the belated reaction to 1979. The reformists say this is the reaction to 2009. And each of them have other things in mind regarding what is this movement, the Arab Spring is. But, and then in 2013, we had the election of Rouhani as president that accelerated this process of negotiations with the United States. This deal became possible as a consequence of few different developments that, parallel to each other, convinced the Iranian or allowed this deal to take place. One is, many people say, well, Iran changed its policy. Well, Iran did change its policy, but let me make you one point here. It was America who made the change of policy first. We have a president that, and I don't have anything against the president of the United States, when he came to power, he said, or before he was elected, he came with this issue of dialogue. I was asked by many of my American Jewish friends what I think about dialogue. I think dialogue is the best way to resolve the problem with Iran. I didn't mean this kind of deal, but I think, and at the same day it was elected, I was traveling from Washington, D.C. to Montreal, where I was invited to give a talk. And the results of the elections were clear early in the evening. So when I started my talk, we knew that there is a new president. And then I say that it is a happy day. It should be a happy day for America and for others. Because I think that the personality of the Shah, for Obama and what he represents, I'm still stuck with the Shah. It was a good thing. The following day, a friend of mine showed me something was published in a Jewish newspaper. It was said that Professor Menashri opened his talk by saying that the election of Obama was the happiest days in his life. Well, I didn't say it, but it doesn't matter. Since then, I worked so hard that my wife will not see this article, that this was my happiest day in my life, that Obama is elected. I'm mentioning it because I really was happy when he was elected, because I think that the promise of dialogue was good. But I think that America has gone too far towards the Iranians, while they could have done yet much better deal. This is not the first time that America helps Iran. Well, Iran fought Saddam Hussein for 8 years. Ultimately, it was only the United States at the head of a coalition in 1999 that removed the enemy or broke the military power of Saddam Hussein in 1991. In 2002, America went at the head of another coalition and removed the enemy number 2 of Iran, the Taliban of Afghanistan. In 2013, America went back and crushed the military power and the power of Saddam and removed Saddam Hussein. Well, the Iranians have a peculiar way to say thank you to America. But as I said, in this case, it was for the first time an intentional policy of accommodating by different policy the improvement of relations with Iran, with the hope that after the deal, Iran will behave better, including relations with Iran, with the United States. The other cause of this change was the growing pressure of the West on Iran. Well, for many years, Iranians say that pressure doesn't bother them, they don't suffer, they will not change their policy because of pressure, the pressure was meaningless. Well, we know it was not. Unemployment, devaluation of the rial, and many, many other things happened in Iran that life became miserable for the Iranians. The election of Rouhani was part of the results of the Green Movement of 2009 and the disillusionment, disappointment, and disenchantment of the young people of Iran. That Khamenei was forced actually to approve his running and ultimately winning. You know, again, the Iranians, one of the most famous slogans of the Islamic Revolution is that America cannot do any damn thing. America cannot do any harm. You can hear it from Khamenei all the time. 2 sentences later, they say to the people, all the problems of Iran are because of the United States. For God's sake, if the American cannot do any harm, why all your problems are because of America? It's meaning that they really have some power after all. The other reason for this facilitating the deal was the change in the region. I'm not going to elaborate on it. I think that Professor Sasa will speak about it tomorrow, and you heard so much about these changes. But as far as Iran is concerned, Iran was in deep problem in 2013, mainly when Syria used chemical weapon in Syria. There was criticism inside Iran, including Rafsanjani, one of the top leaders of the Iranian Revolution. Iran was losing power in Iraq. Iran was losing power in Afghanistan. Iran had problems in Syria. Hezbollah was weakening, and that's why I think that the Iranians, again, had regional reasons for them to reconsider their policy. And of course, the rise of Rouhani as president accelerated this process. But no doubt that the main winners, the people who gained, the country that gained most of the deal is Iran. Iran today is advancing its strategic policy to become a dominant hegemonic country in the Middle East. And I think if they don't do mistakes, and as much as I know the Iranians, they are much more calculated and smart in policy making, and they are unlikely to make big mistakes. They will follow the agreement that they have accepted, unless they realize that they can run away without paying price. But what is 10 years for the Islamic regime in terms of history? 10, 15 years they are delaying their nuclear program. At the end of the day, they will be nuclear. But here is what they gained. They gained, for the first time, the Islamic regime gained international recognition by the Western world, by the world community, if you want. That's the first time that the Islamic regime has been recognized officially and legitimized. Second, there is legitimization of the nuclear policy of Iran. Okay, delayed 10 years, but it is legitimate. It's been recognized by the Western powers with a kosher stamp of the United States, the nuclear program of Iran. It allows Iran to improve its economic situation with the unfreezed assets that they have. Iran, who was considered part of the problem of the Middle East, is becoming part of the solution in the name of the leaders of the Western world. And finally, you can see also people smiling. I appreciate smiles. Not everyone can smile. I was looking, I gave a project to one of my graduate students to look for pictures of Ayatollah Khomeini and find me pictures in which he smiles. There is one, the one that he kisses Arafat, that he comes to visit Iran. Not he loved Arafat, and Arafat was not even invited to Tehran. But Arafat was smart. He said, he was asked in the press conference that if he was invited to Tehran. It was in February '79, just immediately after the revolution, victory of the revolution. He said, one does not need invitation to go home. The Islamic Revolution is the home of the Muslims, and this is, we don't need invitation. So this picture, I see he's smiling. I didn't find any other picture of it. The other Ayatollah that went under house arrest, he was more liberal. All his pictures, he's smiling. And for me, it's meaningful. Now, I learned about to appreciate smiles when I read a book published by, I was 5 years ago, visiting a professor at Oxford, and a young woman of Iranian origin wrote a book about Iran. And it starts with a story of her first visit to Tehran. And she said that after a few minutes that she was in the cab, the taxi driver asked her, you do not live in Iran, do you? He said, actually not, but how do you know? So you know what, you smile. And people in Iran don't smile anymore these days. Now they look at the pictures of Zarif or Rouhani, and I was 2-3 weeks ago in a conference in Nagasaki, and you see the Iranians there, they are on the roof of the world. Unfortunately, Israel has turned to be irrelevant. They are chased after by many countries. Companies want to do business with them. They regain their dignity and respect. They develop good relations with Russia. And also they proved, and I think it's viewed by Saudi Arabia and the Sunni countries, that America doesn't have the back of its allies, but rather supports its enemies. Ask the Saudis what they think about the deal and about Iran. Iran did not change its policy towards Western culture and the United States. Khamenei made it clear, even a day or two before signing the agreement. He went public and said that death to America is part of the essence of the Islamic Revolution. We are not going to retreat from it. When Rouhani visited New York the first time when he was elected, every Iranian president is looking for September of each year, the General Assembly in New York, because that's the only time they can come to the United States. They love to come to the United States, give good interviews, and they know how to manage the best American journalist. So when Rouhani and Zarif were in New York, they came back, and they was criticized by Khamenei on two issues. One was a long and friendly discussion between Zarif and Kerry, and the other, the telephone call between President Obama and President Rouhani. He publicly criticized his president and the foreign minister, and you could ask Zarif how he felt. He went to medical treatment after this criticism in parliament. He has back problems, but I think it was not only back problem. So the Iranians did not have to change their policy. And again, when I say they didn't change their policy towards the United States, rest assured that with Iran, it's exactly the same and more. And before I end with this Iranian thing, I said that, Rouhani promised in his election campaign to turn every problem into opportunity. And I think one should give him the credit. He did so. Unlike many other or some other leaders in the Middle East, which take every opportunity and turn it into problem. In this case, I think that Rouhani really managed between the problems and came to agreement. Israel on its side, let me just share with you some of my views. I don't know how much, 5 minutes I have. Israel on its side did all the mistakes. In calling the Iranian regime Nazis, which is not good for the Jews and for people who know what Nazism is. I was the first time he used this term, that the year is 1938 in Iran is Germany. It was in a conference of the Jewish organizations of North America. He was the head of the opposition. He came there, he spoke. This was the mantra, the year is 1938, Iran, Germany. I spoke after him with his this chief political advisor, Uzi Arad, and I started my talk saying that the year is not 1938 and Iran is not Germany. Because we are belittling the historical significance of the Holocaust if we call everyone that we don't like Hitler. In my lifetime, Nasser was Hitler, Arafat was Hitler, Saddam was Hitler, now Ahmadinejad is Hitler. What I'm going to tell my children at the end, what was Hitler all about? I would suggest, and I suggested since, leave the Holocaust aside. Not with the Mufti and not with Ahmadinejad. Don't make such comparison. It's not good for us. Not because they are nice. They are not. Calling Iran existential threat, I don't know what. In short, There are two games that were originated in Iran, backgammon and chess. After 1967 war, Hassanein Aikal, the close advisor of President Nasser, was asked of the reason of the collapse of the Arab armies in 6 days. He said, while we, the Arabs, were playing backgammon, the Israelis were playing chess. And I think what we see today, that we are playing backgammon, praying to God and I don't know what, waiting for what, and the Iranians are playing chess. Or I didn't mention the visit of Prime Minister Netanyahu to the Congress. That was, I don't know, I don't want to give it names, but I don't think it was appropriate. But even if you go there and you speak, he gave one mentioning of the life of the Jews in Iran. In the history of 25 centuries, or 2,000 years of Jewish life in Iran, he picked up to speak about Haman, which is a controversial issue even in Israel on the issue of we killed them, so what? So that's an example that you want to give them? Not to speak about this poor Esther that was given to someone else to bury. And I was expecting here to give another example. It was to speak about King Cyrus the Great, who granted Jews the freedom to come and build the temple. Now, people tell me, well, it was just before Purim, and he was obliged to say, no, it was just before Purim. Something else happened exactly when the Prime Minister was in Washington. You know what happened? Israel Postal Services issued a stamp to honor Cyrus the Great. So why won't you mention it? So after when I visited, I was that time in Princeton, I went to Israel, met one of his advisors of the Prime Minister, says, where are the advisors? Why you didn't speak about Cyrus the Great? He said, did we issue the stamp? And when I speak with the Iranians, I say, well, this is a trick of the Israelis to speak to the Iranian people behind the back. Well, they don't do these tricks anymore in our country. In our Old Testament, say you should conduct your wars cunningly, shrewdly. But we have not been the cunning and shrewd. So it's, let me conclude. I'll conclude with the dangers of this treaty or the challenges that this deal poses Iran. The deal is not accepted by the radicals. They are not happy with it in the contents. They are not happy with it because it legitimizes the West. And they are not happy with it because it has economic meanings. The Revolutionary Guards and the radicals control the economy. Imagine that so many companies from the West will come and do business in Iran, where they are going. The other thing is the influence on the people. There are today, I say, smiles. There are high expectations that this deal will solve the problems of Iran, and it's going to be extremely difficult to solve the economic problems of a country of 80 million people. This is not the West Bank, this is not Gaza. This is 80 million people. So I think there is a danger of unfulfilled expectations, which if I was the head of the Iranian state, I would have taken it the most serious challenge that we have. We spoke about the Palestinians this morning. The Palestinians also, they are desperate. And this is a danger of the Palestinians, that the fact that they are desperate, they don't have any hope for the future. In Iran, it's the opposite. There's high expectations after the deal, and I don't know if they are going to be met, certainly not the way that the Iranians believe. And the situation in the region is problematic for Iran. Well, while we lost 6 months struggling or fighting with this deal between Iran and the 5+1, the Iranians already were in Tehran developing relations with Russia to invite them to Syria. But are Syria and Iran really in love, Russia and Iran? Iranian approach to Russia to come to Syria is a confession that they have failed. They were supposed to help Bashar al-Assad. The fact that you go to bring the Russians that they don't really like so much means that they say plainly that they failed to do it. They are in Iran, in Syria, and they are losing soldiers. You can see the funerals in Tehran and people becoming upset, so many people, and God knows where it's going to lead Iran, because I don't see the Russians sending troops into beyond the Air Force, but maybe Russia too will have to do it. And the final word is, people think about the future, what will happen. I can tell you, as again here, as a student of history, I don't know what will be the future. But I think that if there is any solution of change in the policy of this regime or the change of the regime, and personally I don't care about which regime they will have. That's their business. I care about the policy of this regime. The policy should be changed. But the only people who can bring it about are the young people of Iran. So let me remind you that Iran, what we saw and fascinated by the Arab Spring 5 years ago, Iran is the only country in the Middle East which had big mass revolutions in the 20th century. There are not many countries which had two big revolutions in 1 century. Iran is the only country in the Middle East that people went to the streets. It brought about constitutional revolution in Iran in 1906. And the people of Iran went to the streets in 2009, and it went to the streets, Mossadegh you heard in 1953, and there have been another movement. I don't want to go far into history. But what we don't have the ability to predict is what make people one day start moving to change regimes. There's a good, nice song in Hebrew. It says, all of a sudden a nation wakes up and start moving. פתאום קם אדם בבוקר ומרגיש שהוא עם ומתחיל ללכת. I like this פתאום, all of a sudden, because we didn't know even the fall of the Soviet Union. Even the movement against Mubarak, and the movement against the Shah, we don't know. So we should remind ourselves that at the end of the day, our abilities are limited in predicting. When this happens, I can promise you, all my friends from political science, of course I knew, the signs were on the wall, everything was clear. Don't trust them, because really no one knows what will be the future. Thank you.